everyone. Welcome back to She's in Business Live. I'm really excited about this conversation that we're going to have today. We're bringing on Giovanna Elias, and she's going to talk to us a lot about human connection. And I want to read her bio because it's just, I can't even surmise this because it's just so cool. Giovanna's a human connection and communications expert, teaching professionals how to perfect the art of people, become a social magnet, overcome people problems, and connect on a deeply authentic level in all relationships, from professional work life to personal and romantic. And I know that a lot of us, especially during the pandemic, I feel like I lost a ton of social skills. I don't know what happened, but I don't know if you're like me or you just want to kind of level up how you're connecting with people, whether you're an introvert, extrovert, whatever it is, so you can optimize your relationships with people on a deeper level. You don't want to miss this. But let me real quick, roll the intro and we'll be back with Giovanna. Giovanna, how are you doing?
Hi, such a pleasure to be here today.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. When I saw your guest expert application come through and I read everything, I was like, oh, literally am going to be taking notes for this because I feel like as an entrepreneur, we forget sometimes. We're so busy in our businesses, or we're so busy in all these things, doing all these things, that we forget about making those human connections and how important they are, and really how to make something make a connection that's deeper than just surface level. So I'm so excited to talk to you. So thank you for coming.
Kate. Thanks, Kate.
So first, let me ask you, because I got to hear how you got into this, because this is other level stuff here. And so I just need to know your entire story. Tell me all the things.
Well, we would be here for days, but really, I think in a nutshell, and maybe I'll just share one story with you in particular. I remember one day, so I'm from Toronto. I remember one day coming out of a subway and watching this couple just screaming at each other in front of everybody, and just watching the dialogue going back and forth. And I was like, wow, for one, if they had the tools to know how to talk to each other, they wouldn't have to be suffering in this moment. Mm-hmm. And for two, all that emotional vomiting is now impacting everybody in this space. Yeah. And so I remember that really standing out to me and thinking, if people knew how to talk to each other, we would minimize the degree of how much we suffer and struggle through any experience in life. And we also wouldn't project that onto other people, whether they're directly involved or not. But I actually went to school initially for journalism and communications. And then I went back to school again for holistic medicine. And so I said, okay, how do I pair these two worlds together? Because the holistic medical piece is really about how do you build a healthy relationship with yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. But then the communications piece is, how does all that well-being, the excellent relationship with self, now show up in your communication with other people, and how does that impact your relationships? Yeah. So I've integrated these two worlds and essentially teaching people, of course, how to have a healthy relationship with self, but also how do you communicate effectively, and how to have the degree of emotional awareness and intelligence to then show up in your relationships and be able to connect deeper with people.
I love that. I love how you married the two areas of expertise together to make this holistic program. It's really cool.
Yeah. It's after much, sitting down and going through it and saying, but I love both worlds and I don't want to have to choose one. So how do I marry them, essentially?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what is human connection? How are we defining it, especially in this conversation that we're having? Why is it important? Why does it matter?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So I always say that the quality of our life is based upon the quality of our relationships. And I think quality relationships really are about having strong, deep connections. And what that means is, can we communicate on deeper levels with each other? And now keep in mind, so this goes layers deep. Communication is both verbal and nonverbal. So it's really a matter of understanding first ourselves, and then also understanding, okay, how can we understand the people we're sharing space with? This shows up in business. How do you read a client? Or a potential client, right? Or you're doing work, you've got a business partner, like how do you understand them? How can you connect on a level and communicate on a level where you're actually in cohesion at work with each other rather than constantly in friction? This shows up in family, right? The same idea. We often assume our family just is the way it is and there's no other way of being with them. And so if we actually learned how to, one of the keys I speak about is get curious and not just assume our family is how they are, but really ask questions, ask about who our parents were before we even came into this life. I think we could then really connect with them on a deeper level, understand the layers of their life experience and how it could help us. And of course, then this shows up in our romantic relationships. Sometimes those are the most difficult ones. And the relationship we have with our kids, if we are parents in the world. And of course, even with complete strangers. And strangers can become very good friends, very good business partners, very good clients, anything of that nature. So all this to say that connection, I believe, is so deeply important, because when we are able to connect, when we're able to communicate effectively, then we're really able to understand the person in front of us. Mm-hmm. And when we are able to do that, we're now having these healthy relationships. And neuroscience is actually coming to show that the thing that fulfills humans the most is healthy relationships, because it comes with a flood of all these good, happy neurochemicals like oxytocin and dopamine and whatnot. So serotonin, right? So we want to, right? I shouldn't even say want to, we naturally and instinctually feel good when our relationships feel good. And we also know that we kind of fall off track when our relationships do too.
I love the idea that this is just kind of like hardwired in us. And so no matter if we're introvert, we self-classify as like introverts or extroverts or ambivert, like the connection, whether it's with a spouse, a loved one, a family member, a friend, a business partner, that it's self-rewarding in and of itself. We're just inherently that way. You can't fight it. So
no, not
better.
Exactly. I mean, introverts and extroverts, it applies both ways. It's so instinctual, and it doesn't mean you have to like the whole world. It just means that the relationships you do have, you can foster them deeply and really have that meaningful connection within them.
Love that.
Yeah.
And so when I was doing some little e-snooping on your on all your awesomeness, I was reading about this connection code, and I didn't get to go too deep on it. So can you talk to me about what is it? What is the connection code? What do we need to know about it, especially for a lot of these entrepreneurs, business owners, whether they're just starting out or they're kind of in growth and scale mode, bringing in team, bringing in new clients, lots of peopling going on, as I like to say.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the connection code.
Yeah, so the connection code is my 9-key system to being able to build deep connections. And of course, this encompasses interpersonal relationship skills, effective communication, emotional intelligence, all these different elements and skills integrated into these 9 keys, these 9 principles. And so I walk my clients through this process called the connection code to be able to show up on the other end, actually really understanding, like I said, who's in front of you, having these powerful relationships, and having it actually be meaningful rather than, like you said, something superficial. Now, what is the connection code? What are these 9 keys? Once again, we'd probably be here all day if I went through all of them, but I can start and maybe share the first 3 and just sprinkle a little goodness. So and like I said previously, I always start with the first one being curiosity. And I think the moment we really get curious, first and foremost about ourselves, why do we do what we do? Why do we like what we like? What are our boundaries? What is important for us? The moment we're clear within ourselves, then we can also, and the moment we get curious about ourselves, we get clear, and then we can, of course, communicate that. But I think what actually leads to very, very deep understanding of people and connection with people is to be curious about who they are and why they do what they do and why they believe what they believe and why they practice what they practice. And it doesn't mean we have to necessarily agree. It just means it allows us to have a grander understanding, a grander picture of the person sitting in front of us. And so I always say those are kind of like little data points. And these little data points can sort of add up to just peeling back the onion and going layers deeper into knowing what the person wants, what they need, what they appreciate. And this all comes from asking questions, from being curious. So, I mean, even as simple, we're talking business here, as simple as like a potential client that comes your way. You want to know what their need is. And the only best way to really understand, you know, where they at right now in their life is by asking them. And not just, you know, a superficial type of question, but I always say, you know, there's kind of 3 tiers here. There's the active listening, the soulful sharing, and then the quality questioning. And so if you're really asking quality questions, then you're pairing that with the active listening piece where you ask the question, but while you're actively listening, you're actually hearing the layers of what they're saying to you, and then asking another question to go even one layer deeper based off the previous thing they said. So it's kind of that ping pong game of, okay, they said this to me, how do I go even deeper? And then, you know, they're responding, okay, that's a very fascinating piece. What's that about? Why do you believe this? How can we set that? How does that make you feel? Right now we're going layers deeper into understanding the person and their needs, for example. The same applies to a team, right? Your team perhaps wants direction. They all have different skills. And so understanding what that is, understanding what, you know, inspires them, what gets them excited, maybe what doesn't. These are the factors that will also help to create that cohesion. So that would be the first one. This is why I'm like, we could be here all day if I go into it. The second,
I like that. I feel like it's like it's a seemingly lower barrier of entry if you can just like, okay, I'm just going to be curious. I don't have to be like, I'm just going to get started with my feet. Like, I'm just going to ask some questions. I'm going to like actively listen just for even just a few minutes. I think it's a good, I like that it's the first one of the connection code because I feel like it's, you know, just think of a couple questions, ask them and listen. So I really like that. And you think common sense, but we don't do it.
No, we don't. And it's so funny you say this, Kate, because the research actually shows, when I was looking into research, it's a professor in Michigan, I believe, named Todd Kashdan, brilliant guy. And so he showed the research on curiosity. And he said, as kids, we are very curious. Everything's new and different and interesting and fascinating. But it's fascinating. So we're up here as children. I'm not sure if you can see this on the screen. So up here as kids, we're like at our top peak of curiosity. As we become teens, that progressively goes down. And it's not because teenagers become less curious. It's just because they become afraid to ask, especially in front of their peers. They don't want to look foolish or stupid or silly or any of these things. So they're still, you know, there's still a degree of curiosity. They're still learning. But there's that hesitancy. Like, do I ask? Will I look stupid? Should I? Maybe, maybe not. And everybody knows that they really appreciate that kid in the room that asked the question because they're like, oh, okay, I needed to know that too. I just didn't want to ask. So that shows up. But as adults, not only does it go down, it almost concaves in the research. Really? And it's to illustrate adults actually literally, in a sense, numb themselves off from asking questions. And I think it's because we're of the belief that we should already know everything as adults and that there's nothing more we necessarily need to learn, and that we would really look foolish as adults if we were asking the things that we assume everybody else must know already. And so we don't ask. And I think by doing that, we actually do ourselves a disservice, and we do a disservice to the relationship that can be built because, I mean, people can teach us new things all the time. And of course, we can connect deeper.
I always reassure myself that other people don't know stuff when I like Google it, especially like we have a few younger staff members and like so they'll say something and I'm like, I don't know what that means. I feel like an idiot and I Google it and then I see just like millions of different questions. I'm like, all right, I wasn't necessarily supposed to know this. That's how I always reaffirm I'm not a complete idiot. I like, you know. But
So
go ahead.
I love that.
So
I
what's
love
the
that.
second part of the connection code? Sorry,
No.
I'm trying not to distract you. I'm so excited about this topic. Go ahead.
It's all good. And actually, just speaking to your point right now of what you said, the irony too is the research shows that the more questions people ask, the more they're perceived as intelligent. So yeah, it's very instinctual that we say, wow, that person's very inquisitive. They must be very intelligent. And not only that, the more inquisitive you are, the more you learn, which means the more different types of conversations you can walk into, because now you have a variety of knowledge in different spheres. So the irony is we're afraid to ask, but on the other side of that coin is that we're actually perceived as more intelligent when we do ask. So I say, why not anyways?
Yeah.
You know, why do I'm almost like, you tell me instead of Google, unless I'm alone, of course.
Right.
But if I'm with you, I'm like, why don't you tell me more about that one? Because I'm not quite sure I know.
Love that. I love that.
As for the second and third piece of the connection code, they play together. The second one is consciousness, and it's really just about awareness. And of my holistic medical piece of, you know, being aware of what's taking place in our physical body, in our mind, what our thoughts, our emotional states, and then of course what's energetically happening. I use the word energy. Some people say spirituality, but I think it's energetically what is taking place on our own, but also when we are interacting with other people, when we're in a dialogue or conversation, interaction with someone else. It's really a matter of having that understanding and that overall awareness. So without going too much into detail, I think one of the biggest pieces around consciousness that I always like to impart onto people is being mindful of what I call your energy levels. And are they being filled or are they being depleted? Yeah. And so before I go into an interaction, I like to check in with myself and see where I'm at energetically. During the interaction, where am I at energetically? And post interaction, where am I at? So you may have experienced before, Kate, and I'm sure the people watching would also agree with this, that have you ever had a conversation with someone that you walked away and you're like, oh my God, I'm so drained. That was so heavy and intense. And like, I don't really want to spend much time around this person. Yes. The opposite can be said too, that maybe you walked into a conversation either being, you know, kind of like low energy or even just neutral, but you come out and you're like, wow, I'm on a high. That was such a great conversation. What a cool person, right? I'm sure we've all experienced this. Yep. So we can have those two extremes. And I think that is what we want to be mindful of. You know, what took place in that interaction that either energized me or that drained me? And is that coming more internally from my own interpretation and filters and dialogue on the situation? Or is that, you know, something energetically they imparted onto me? And I think it's both ways. I don't think it's one or the other. I think we kind of intermingle to, you know, then create a feeling at the end. And to end that piece, I always like to say that you always want to be mindful of how you leave someone feeling. Because they're going to associate consciously or unconsciously that feeling with your presence. And so I always want to leave people feeling at least some sort of energetic uplift from my presence. For the most part, we can't be perfect, but you know, we work towards that.
So I just go in a hidey hole when I'm in a bad mood.
No, and I'm so glad you said this. No, I would almost say don't avoid.
Yeah.
I would say have a conversation and be authentic and be transparent and be open. Yeah. And at the end of the conversation, you can either move in a direction of connection or disconnection. So you can choose to connect at the end of the conversation, right? It doesn't mean that like, okay, I'm not feeling good, I need to run away. It means I'm not feeling good. Let's talk about it so we can actually find connection in the end and understand each other.
Oh, I like that. I did not know that was an option. I like it.
Yeah.
I thought I had to hide.
Of course, yeah. I mean, of course, depending, once again, being mindful of all the different pieces at play, because if someone needs space, then maybe it's saying, okay, babe, take an hour and let's come back and talk about this in an hour. Or if you need space, then you choose that and communicate it.
Right.
Or some people say, actually, let's really discuss this. Let's address this now.
Yeah.
That way we can get to connection quicker.
Love it.
So, it's checking in. It's always checking in.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea of just being upfront about where you're at, and like, and just the more you communicate about it, the less of a scary, like, heavy thing it has to be, even if you're having a bad day, because you're openly communicating. You're not letting your bad day hold other people down. So I like that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also speaking to that, I think there's a very different dialogue, Kate, between me just emotionally vomiting on you, which would look like just, pardon my French, maybe shit talking or speaking so poorly for just going, people that go on rants, like this is bad and that's bad and this is bad and just going. That's like an emotional vomit, and I would not suggest you do that.
Right.
Whereas opening up and saying, this is where I'm emotionally at, can we navigate through this together?
Yeah.
That's perfectly healthy, and that's actually encouraged. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, should I move on to the third piece?
Yeah, tell me that. Sorry, keep slowing it down.
So
Go.
The third piece is what I call clarity. And it's, super, super as simple as that. The clearer we are within ourselves about what we want in our romantic partners, what we want with our business team, what we want with our business partner, what type of client we want to attract, what type of relationship we want to have with family or with our kids, right? Or who we even want to be. The clearer we are about that, the clearer our communication can be. And so oftentimes problems show up when the communication isn't clear and there's a breakdown in communication because we're not clear first within ourselves about what's important for us and what our needs are and what our boundaries are and what our values are. And so when we get clear on that, we can then communicate that clearly. And so sounds really simple. It's not necessarily difficult, but I think this is why it's sometimes beautiful to have a coach lead us through these things, because we have blind spots. We often can't see clearly what somebody else can see clearly for us. So to have someone walk us through it and, really navigate, okay, what is an ideal relationship in this space with this type of person, and so on and so forth, and really digging into it to really see what your values are very clearly, then that can really help show up in your communication. And then, of course, the degree of connection you'll have with someone.
Love that.
So those are the first three.
Yeah.
There's, like I said, there's 9. Won't go into all 9 with you, but this is what I carry my clients into through a program, and it's powerful. I'm biased, but I think it's powerful.
Well, I think it's so powerful because it doesn't even just hit one area of someone's life. It's everything. Like everything is based around it, Yeah. So like development even in one area is going to make you a better connector person, have healthier relationships in the other area, which is really rare to have, especially in the coaching space. Like a coach who can say, hey, this is actually going to actually have an offer or have a program that will help you across the board. That, to me, from a business perspective even, I think that's like amazing and like huge ROI. So tell me a little bit about what is the basis of a healthy relationship? How does somebody know they're in a healthy relationship, not in a healthy relationship? How to get to having a healthy relationship, whether that's in business, life, love, all across the board.
Oh, wow. Okay, this is...
Big question.
How do we unpack each individual relationship? So, oh goodness. Well, very simply, how do we know we're in a healthy relationship? This goes back to the consciousness piece. Checking in. How do you feel at the end of every day?
Yeah.
Because if you're drained in any of those relationships, if you're coming out of work, out of meetings, and you're feeling drained, if you're coming out of, or having a conversation with your partner and you're feeling drained, or with your kids and you're drained, like if there's constantly conflicts taking place, for me, that's already an indication that there's something out of alignment. There's something unhealthy or toxic taking place in that relationship that needs to be changed. Yeah. So first and foremost, I always say, check in with the body. Mm-hmm. We're always so much in our head, which is an aspect of it. And I am very much myself, but I always say we want to tune into the body. How does the body physically feel? How is it responding as we're moving through our day, right? Are we feeling anxiety, or are we feeling sort of this openness and this excitement in our chest, right? Mm-hmm. And that energy is very naturally a clear indication to us. Our body is always speaking to us. So if we can tune in and just listen, then one, that's a very clear indication of how am I feeling in these different areas, these different arenas of relationships in my life, and what needs to be changed. And that, once again, is the clarity piece of what's working, what's not working. On a slight side note, I teach my clients what I call day scans, and I get them at the end of every day to just list off everything they've done in their day, super point form, doesn't need to be detailed, just like basic things like woke up, meditated, had a smoothie, went to the gym, worked, had team meeting, whatever, very simple things. And beside it, to indicate one or two emotions that they felt while doing that thing. And that, for us, once you start doing that every single day, you start to notice patterns. Okay, when I'm doing X thing or I'm with X person, I feel this way. Is that something I want to continue feeling every day of my life or not? No. And so that builds a huge awareness as to whether we want to actually repeat certain things or how things could be changed in such a way that actually benefits all of us. You asked me another question. How do we create healthy relationships?
Yeah, I guess how do we like move? I mean, I guess like that's a huge, but like how do we start moving towards a healthy relationship if we've identified, okay, like this relationship is not healthy, but it's not a relationship I can get out of. Like I have to deal with this person every day at work, or you know, this is my marriage, or I guess those are kind of different, but like,
yeah.
How do we start to take that first step, especially if the other person's kind of not aware that it might be unhealthy? What do we start? What's the first step?
Yeah. Okay. Love it. Love the question. Yeah. So clear for me now.
Yeah.
So we live in a physical world just as much as we live in an energetic world. And so what that means is that, and this goes back to the piece I talked about how do you leave someone feeling? That's energetic. That's something that we are, experiencing, whether we're conscious of it or not. And so what did I want to say about this? The physical component in terms of, how do we manage those relationships, especially if they feel hard to get out of or hard to avoid. The physical part of that is tuning in with yourself and understanding your values in that area. So, for example, at work, if you value, let's say, your employees being able to go into creative flow states, then you need to also understand that you can't be sending emails off every 20 or 30 minutes. You're going to break their flow, right? Or if you value team cohesion and, clear communication, then maybe that means needing to set like weekly meetings for the whole team to sit down and just check in and see how everyone's doing, not even just in work, but in life, right? And so it's really first sitting down. This goes back to the clarity piece, getting clear on what do you value in that arena. And if it's romantic relationships, then, it's asking yourself, what do I value? Do I value trust? Is it honesty? Is it commitment? Is it reliability, right? Whatever it may be, getting clear maybe on your top 5 values. And then when you do have that awareness, then you can start executing based on that. And execution can look like 2 things. One, it shows up in communication. So it shows up in directly saying, hey, I value when you're reliable and when you show up on time. So how can we work that out so we make that happen? And is that even possible to make it happen on your end? Are you able to show up on time? Because if you're not, then maybe we need to, work something else out, right? But essentially always looking to find the strategy or the solution based on that. So that comes from communicating first, very clearly and calmly, what are your values and what do you want the end point to actually look like? Because if you don't know what you want that to look like, or even work through it together, let's say, based on your values, and also asking them, does that align with you and where you're at, right? And so now you're having a dialogue of understanding. The second piece to this, it's really interesting. I remember studying this when I was in holistic medical school, and I remember my professor actually telling us she had a very poor relationship with her boss. And she said for the life of her, she really couldn't stand her boss. her boss seemed to have treated her poorly compared to everyone else in the team. And so she did energetic practices, energetic work. And really that could look as simple as sending the intention every morning of, that could look like energy, like sending white light, or, sending a loving thought their way, or something of appreciation, or even what we call courting. There's a courting exercise, which is imagining, this sort of cord between your heart and theirs, and giving it light and giving it energy. And so something like that repeated over time, if you were to set that intention every day, one, your energy will naturally shift towards that person. You won't be showing up with the same tension in your body. So already it serves you, regardless of whether they change or not. But there's something crazy. Don't ask me how this works, but like I said, the world operates in energy, atoms, cells, everything around us we can't necessarily see. Things are working without us being able to necessarily see them and understand them fully. But I think energetically things also will shift with the other person. And I've done this so many times, Kate, with clients, to the point that I'm like, well, this is crazy. Crazy how within 24 hours I've had clients come back to me and say, wow, like I have a totally different relationship with that person now. Like they called me last night after our session and totally apologized about this thing. And I'm like, I don't know what that's about, but something's going on.
You're like, I'm not looking to gift horse in the mouth. I'm just going with it and going to do it.
Precisely. So all this to say that I like to play in both worlds. I don't think there's just this solid, Newtonian physical world. I think there's both the Newtonian and there's the quantum. And when we can play in both spaces, and that means physically showing up in terms of being able to get clear on our values, communicate them, find a solution, is more of the physical piece, but then also doing your own energetic work to clean the emotions you have around those people, and they will naturally show up differently around you too.
I love that. Like that's a solution. Really. That
I'm all about solutions.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm like, give me details.
Yeah, I love that. So say somebody, they're having a consistent problem with somebody. It's kind of like an active, not just unhealthy relationship, but it's, it's conflict. It's, it's something that, and they keep butting heads. Maybe they've tried to do, what we just talked about, but it's not working. They're just still having this kind of, this relationship of conflict. What's one thing somebody can do to actively kind of get on, I guess, in sync with that person more, or come to a different place with that person where there's kind of like active problems happening?
Yeah. So one of the other keys that I talk about is what I call flow states. And I think we can show up best in our life when we are able to put ourselves into different flow states. And what that essentially means is that whenever there is that tension, whenever there is that conflict, that always starts with us. And so, everything starts with us. We attract everything. And I do believe it's our way of trying to work through something. And that's why often we'll see the same problems show up until we finally have worked through it within ourselves. Right. And so, the long answer would be there's probably layers of cleaning within that person, layers of beliefs and stored maybe trauma or energy or whatever it is that could be released that they're just not aware of. That I would say I would leave into the hands of a coach. But the other piece that I think is very simple that someone could apply in any given moment, especially when they do feel that tension or that conflict or resistance, is to put themselves into flow states. And what that really means is when you totally lose track of space and time and identity, and we diminish the ego. And so that could look like, exercising and you're totally in your zone. That could look like painting and you just get lost in the art of it, or writing or journaling, or, any sort of activity or creative piece. Even traveling or, trying new things or going to new places can totally get you into that flow where you wouldn't necessarily be in that. Although with that being said, we're not just going to hop on a plane when the conflict happens. So, for me, I find right? Although those are, it's good preventative measures to implement, you know, a trip or two into your year, regardless, at least. But I would say the quickest, most effective thing, exercise, any sort of creative work, like I said, journaling or painting, if that's kind of your shtick, and also breath work practices. This might seem too broad for those that are not necessarily familiar with breath work. I do walk my clients through a lot of different breathwork techniques, but essentially the idea is when we really oxygenate the body, our brain goes into this really sort of calm, relaxed state, and it starts to see things very differently and much more clearly. And we're not so attached to the problem, and we're able to actually find solutions. Same happens when, you know, we're working out, you got that dopamine and adrenaline running through your body. You're not so fixated now on the conflict. Your body actually has changed its emotional state, which now allows you to see the problem from a different angle. So I believe it was Albert Einstein that said, you can't change a problem from the same place of consciousness that created the problem. In other words, if this is the problem, if this is the problem and you're still sitting within the problem and you're in the center of it, you're still in the heat, the emotional heat of that problem, you won't find solutions in that place. If you walk out of it and say, let me change my emotional state over here, let me go work out, let me do something creative, let me go paint, let me do breath work, whatever it is, let me journal. Now you're changing your emotional state, which allows you to look at this problem from a totally different perspective. Now you can revisit it from a new state and find different types of solutions.
It's like when somebody sends you that angry email and you want to send it back and you're like, my response email is going to be totally on point, right? And then you read it the next day and you're like, that was a hot mess. I should have given that some time to chill out. And every time, because you're in it, you're like, yeah, I'm going to fix this. And they're like, oh, embarrassing. Yeah. I like that
I totally get it. I love how honest you're being about it too.
It's my biggest thing. I'm like, I'm going to fix it right now. Oh, that made it worse. Should have given it a day. So,
and once again, sorry, I think we're on a slight delay here, Kate. I was just going to say, once again, it's checking in on your emotional state, and can you manage it in that moment? And if so, have the conversation. If you feel you can't, then, or even write it, don't send it, and revisit it the next day, and then see if you'd still send it or not.
Right. It's almost always a no. I won't. I'm going to redo this. Or the problem's not even a problem the next day. That's what's always so funny. I didn't really think of it as something that I should be. I just try to okay, I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm just not going to worry about it. But really making the conscious effort, hey, there's this problem. I'm in this state. If I can actively go change my state, I can see this differently. And actually making that a practice, I love that kind of idea of I'm in this state, I'm going to go get into a different state and see see how I see it differently. So I love that. So talk to me a little bit.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I'm going to be doing all of these things. So tell me about, I have trouble sometimes with small talk or talking to people who I don't think that I have maybe a common interest or anything like that. It's not that I don't want to, it's just, it's tough for me to engage in those kinds of conversations. And I know that there's some people who have, my mother is the most, she will get your life story within 5 minutes of knowing you, no matter who you are, what walk of life you're from, no problem. And I always watch her kind of in awe of how she can do that with literally anyone. And, I just sit there wow, well, if this person was an entrepreneur, this would be me, but they're not. So I don't know what to talk to them about, or they're into my hobbies or whatever. How does somebody who might have some problems in that kind of initial connection, if there's not something that's really tangible and obvious there, how can someone basically talk to anyone at any time, any place, no matter the context. What are some tips you have for people like me who don't find that to be a natural, like a natural thing?
Love the question. So this once again goes back to the curiosity piece, and just getting curious for the sake of it. And I always believe every single human being has something they can teach us. Mm-hmm. So my objective every time going into a conversation is finding that gem. Yeah. It's like, what can you offer me from your expertise? People love, by the way, talking about themselves, not necessarily from a superficial standpoint, but just because it's the easiest subject. Right. They know that subject well. Right. So if you ask them about their life experiences, what they've been through, what they've done, whatnot, it's very easy for them because they can share it with you, and finding those little gems in the conversation. To start it off, I would say oftentimes environment can be the very thing that helps. Mm-hmm. So we oftentimes come into a conversation based on whatever the environment permits. So, if you're at a social gathering together, maybe for a certain type of event or a fundraiser, or you're at a networking event, or even if you're at a coffee shop, mm-hmm. It's as simple as maybe leveraging either off the environment itself, and you can be playful and make jokes like, oh, you got this one today. That was one of my favorites, but I've moved on to this kind, or whatever it is, or have you ever tried this? Whatever it is to enter into the conversation. But also it could even just be something as simple as what you see in the person. So, if I see that someone's got like rad glasses on, or a really cool style, or I really just like their flow, like I'll let them know. I'm like, oh, I love that. That looks great on you. Right? Or you've got a great energy. Like, I love that you're smiling at everybody, even just acknowledging what it is that I presented. Now, I'm not saying go out of your way to give comments or compliments if they're false. I don't do that. Has to come from a very authentic place, because it will be felt. Right. But like I said, if there is something you notice, I just wouldn't be shy to express that. Mm-hmm. And if the environment usually always helps, then you would feed off of whatever it is that brought you to that place. But I also think that humans feel we need to sit in this place of small talk for a really long time, as if like it's not appropriate to go deeper. Mm-hmm. And I think when you finally give yourself permission to say, if I really want to know this about the person, I'm just going to ask. Right. If somebody even gives me some sort of little insight into something, then I'm just going to ask. Yeah. As uncomfortable as, it may present, or as we're socialized to believe that, oh, you don't ask a stranger that, right. I'm still going to ask. Now, there's two things that come to mind when we're talking about this. I remember years ago, a friend of mine came to me and he said, I went to a networking event, and this girl just kept talking to me about her fashion business, and all she wanted to do was talk about this fashion business and blah, blah, blah. And he was just about to open up his own business. And he was like, this conversation was so boring, I was trying to get out of it. I said, what did you learn from the conversation? He's like, absolutely nothing. I totally tried running away. I said, well, you're opening up a business very soon, correct? And he's like, yes. And I said, she's running a successful fashion business, correct? He's like, yes. I said, so you might not care at all about fashion, but that doesn't mean she may not have some sort of business insights that she could have offered you. So even if it's not directly in alignment with your business, it doesn't mean there's not some sort of teaching piece that you could have taken away. So in that case, rather than making it all about a fashion business, I would have probably asked her, like, what would you recommend are like the top 3 things that helped your business really take off? In which case, now you're gearing the conversation towards business and really learning from her. And then that creates a ripple effect. It's like the first question, like I said, if you're actively listening, that leads to the next question and the next and the next and the next. So now you're unraveling that onion. But it's really about, like I said, finding that gem. Okay, she's talking about fashion business. Well, I'm opening a business. So what can I really learn from this piece?
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, tell me, like, you've mentioned coaching a couple times, and I think that a lot of people did not know that there was such a coach. It's funny because I was recently looking for books on like soft skills, and it's just not something that I ever worked on, and I want to prioritize it over the next year or two. It's just working on those kinds of things, which is a lot of what we're talking about here, and just and making those communications and making it smooth, and so the fact that there's a coach, like that's even better to me because I don't have to figure it out all by myself. So talk to me about what kind of coaching do you do? How does it work? I read somewhere, I think that you're doing a retreat coming up. So give me the lay of the land. If this resonates with somebody, how can they start working with you? Tell me all the things.
Yeah. Great. So as for the retreat, it's a 5-day retreat, and we really go deep into the 9 keys of the connection code, starting from curiosity, ending at the final key. And we really dig into it, and it's a combination of, theory and seminar stuff mixed with activities and exercises and interacting and networking with people. So I'm currently living in Mexico, so we're going to have it down here. So anybody that is interested, please feel free to reach out, and I can send you all the details around that. And as for the coaching piece, I do 2 pieces with my clients. I do a 3-month program where I walk them through, once again, this connection code, the 9 keys, plus we do group coaching once a week. And then if my clients want the option, which I personally love, is to do the one-on-ones once a week as well. Because the one-on-ones, while you can learn, this 9 key system, while it really can just in and of itself be extremely beneficial, and even doing the group stuff is really beautiful because I think we learn a lot from being in group. I think that one-on-one stuff is where we can really hone in on what's like layers deep and going on internally within you. And that's when I really draw from my holistic medical background. And so it's of course, integrating the relationship and communication pieces, but it's also saying, let's actually see what's really going on inside of you. And does this come from childhood? And does this come from family? And are these old patterns that are just neuroprogrammed in the brain that we need to kind of switch up and play around with and see what we want to replace this with? So it's much more tailored, let's say. And so I like to offer the both pieces where, of course, people can go through this 9 key program and do it as a group as well. But then the one-on-one stuff I personally love to do with my clients to just really get at the crux of what's underneath it all.
And what do you think the most, like, who is this for, especially for the, for the coaching piece? Like, are these folks who are having trouble in business and in relationships? Are they like certain personality types? Who's kind of like your sweet spot in working with?
Yeah, love the question. Would love to give a clear answer. And I'll say this. I have a lot of business owners come to me and they think they need work with their teams and, business dynamics. And then as we unfold what's going on, it's really about their relationship with their own self-esteem and their own confidence and how they feel about themselves. And that's now showing up in their work dynamics. So they think they're coming for the business piece. It ends up being like personal, internal stuff and family stuff, because it always goes back to family and our childhood, of course, as well. Right. But then I have the other side where I have people really coming for romantic relationship pieces. And they're like, wow, this is not working with my partner. I even do couples therapy, and they'll come in and say, hey, can I bring my partner in as well? And so we'll go through that and then realize a lot of times what's not really working out in a relationship is because they haven't built self-esteem in the other areas of their life, be it their work, their career, their business, their finances, being able to take care of things and feel independent and confident on their own. So would love to say it's predominantly entrepreneurs. I'm even moving into a space where I would love to do more work with lawyers and accountants, because I feel like busy professionals in general, it's like work. And then relationship seems to be the last thing, right? That goes on the back burner. And they're like, it's kind of like you wake up one morning and you're like, what's the relationship that I have with my family or with my romantic partner? Or do I even have time to date or spend time with my kids? right?
And
And
it happens
so,
so fast, like all of a sudden, it's,
yeah,
oh my God, I'm 40. What am I doing? I've been nose to the
yeah,
grindstone so long.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
especially for the busy pros.
So very simplified answer, we
Yeah,
could say busy professionals
perfect. That's
are
my
who's coming
favorite
my
group.
way.
That we need the
Yeah,
most help in all
yeah,
areas of life,
yeah.
ironically.
And I get it, because it's like if you haven't honed in on those skills early, then you just get caught up in the grind of work. And then, like you said, you wake up, you're like, I'm 40, and how are all these relationships looking? And like I said, the research shows, it's a brilliant neuroscientist, Dr. Andrew Huberman, showed in the neuroscience research that humans need connection just as much as we need food and water.
Really?
And so when we lack those deep, meaningful connections, we turn to food. It's a very unconscious thing, but the opposite can be said. When people fall in love, they often forget to eat, or when they do eat, food tastes even richer and sweeter. And so this literally shows up in the science. There's a very direct connection between this, like, the same feeling, the same response we get physiologically and neurologically in the body and brain when we eat is the same thing we get when we connect deeply. And so if we can actually have those connections, then we're essentially feeding a basic human need.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, where can people get in contact with you? I know they can DM you here on Facebook. Give us all and we'll put everything in the description, comments, show notes if they're not already there. But tell us what's the best way to get a hold of you and to find out if they might be a good mutual fit working with you.
Definitely. So you guys are welcome to reach out to me on Instagram, Giovanna, giovanna.fjm.elias. So you can shoot me a message that way. Or, I kind of like the personal touch. You guys are welcome to shoot me a message on WhatsApp. It's a Canadian number, so you might need to add a +1, possibly. But the number is 647-773-9398. And you guys can just shoot me a direct message that way, and we'll chat. And then we can have a call and connect and see where you're at.
Love it. I love it. Like, yeah, just call me. Just shoot me a message.
I didn't operate that way before. I was like, no, give your number up. That's insane. But then I realized, I'm like, it's the most personal touch.
Yeah.
It's the most personal touch. It's so direct. It's so much more direct than any social media message. So,
absolutely.
Whatever tickles your fancy.
Well, Giovanna, thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us all this brilliant information. I feel like I have things that I can start applying right away in my own business, in my own life. So I know that tons of people are going to apply what they've learned here too. I hope you guys all have enjoyed this talk. We're going to be here next week on She's in Business Live, and I hope that you'll join us. But Giovanna, thank you again for being with us. And everybody, go give her a call, send her a message, go connect with her, and she's going to teach you the ways of actually connecting in a meaningful way in all of your relationships. So thank you again.
Beautiful. Thanks, Kate. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
All right, you too. Sarah, can you roll the outro?